She looked at me and said, "I think I deserve better than this." I didn't argue, just nodded and stepped back without a fight. A month later, when she came back, what she found instead was something she couldn't handle. "I think I deserve better than this." She said it on a Tuesday night, not during a fight, not in the heat of some screaming match where words get thrown like weapons. She said it calmly, the way you'd announce that you're switching phone carriers. Low voice, flat eyes, arms crossed loosely over her chest, like the decision had already been made before she even opened her mouth. I was standing in the kitchen, still holding a spatula, still wearing the old gray hoodie with the fraying sleeve I kept promising to throw away. The pasta I'd been making for both of us was still bubbling on the stove. I turned to look at her, and for a moment, just one still, suspended moment, I waited for the part where she said something else, where she followed it up with, "I just need more from you," or "We need to talk about this." But there was nothing else, just those 8 words floating in the air between us, and the sound of boiling water. I set the spatula down. I looked at her, and I nodded, not dramatically, not slowly, like some broken man in a movie, just once. "Steady." "Okay," I said. That was it. One word. She blinked. I think she expected something different. A protest. A question. Maybe tears, or anger, or some version of me grabbing her hands and begging. But I didn't do any of that. I turned back to the stove, turned off the burner, and stood there in the silence that followed. She left 30 minutes later, and I ate the pasta alone. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. We'd been together for 2 years and 4 months. I was 31, she was 28. We'd moved in together 8 months prior. Her idea, mostly, though I'd been ready for it. Her name was Claire, and for a long time, I thought she was the person I was going to spend my life with. Here's the part one didn't tell anyone for a long time. I wasn't surprised. Not by the words. Not even by the timing. I'd felt it coming the way you feel weather change before you see it. That slow shift in pressure. That quiet before everything moves. What did surprise me was how I felt in the moments after she walked out of that apartment. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The pasta cooling in the pot. The overhead light casting that yellow glow across the counter. And I waited for the grief. I waited for the floor to tilt. I waited for the burning behind my eyes. Instead, what I felt was something that took me almost a week to name properly. It was relief. Not because I didn't love her. Not because the relationship meant nothing. But because I had been holding something so tightly for so long that my hands had gone numb. And I hadn't even noticed until she let go first. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start with that Tuesday night. It starts about 7 months earlier, on a Saturday morning when I woke up and looked at the ceiling and thought, something is wrong. Not wrong like a fight. Not wrong like a betrayal. Wrong like a frequency that's slightly off. Like music playing in almost the right key. Claire and I had always been different people. That had been exciting at first. She was social, organized, ambitious in a loud, visible way, career titles and group plans, and constantly knowing what the next step was. I was quieter. I liked being home. I liked cooking meals that took 2 hours, reading books nobody around me had heard of, spending Saturday afternoons on long walks with no destination. In the beginning, she called those things charming. "You're so grounded," she used to say, like it was a compliment. And maybe it was, then. But somewhere in the second year, grounded started sounding a lot like boring in the way she said it. Not with her words. With a sigh. With a look. With the way she'd grab her phone when I was talking about something I was reading. Not because she needed to check anything, but because she'd simply stopped listening. I noticed all of it. I just didn't say anything. And that was my mistake. Not my only one, but the first one. About 4 months before that Tuesday, she came home from a work event with her coworker, a guy named Felix. I'd met Felix twice. He was loud in that particular way where everything he said had an audience built in. Claire found it magnetic. I found it exhausting. They came back to the apartment at 11:30. I'd stayed home that night, not feeling up to another 3-hour networking event where I stood in the corner, holding a drink and watching her laugh with people she'd forget in 5 years. I heard them at the door. Loud voices, both of them still buzzing from whatever energy a free bar networking event puts in people. Felix came in, looked around our apartment like he was appraising it, and said, "Cozy place, man." He said it the way people say interesting when they mean something else. Claire laughed. Not nervously, just laughed. Like it was a light comment. Like I wasn't standing right there. I offered Felix a drink. He said no, said he had to get going. He gave Claire a hug goodbye that lasted maybe 2 seconds longer than it needed to. She walked him to the door, and when she came back in, she didn't mention it. She just started talking about the event like nothing had happened. I didn't bring it up either, but something settled in my chest after that night. Something quiet and cold, like a stone dropped into still water. I want to be fair to Claire, because she wasn't a villain in this story. She wasn't cruel. She didn't cheat. She didn't lie to my face. She was just becoming someone who needed a different life than the one she was building with me. And instead of saying that clearly, she did what a lot of people do. She stayed, and slowly, quietly, she made the staying feel like a punishment for both of us. The comments started small. You never want to go anywhere. You should put yourself out there more. Felix just got promoted. He's only 29. Doesn't that make you think? I was a graphic designer. Freelance. Comfortable, but not climbing. I'd chosen that deliberately. I liked the freedom. I liked waking up and working in my own space, setting my own hours, taking on projects that interested me. Claire had respected that when we met. But somewhere along the way, freelance designer stopped sounding like a choice and started sounding like an excuse in her eyes. I could see it. I just kept hoping she'd find her way back to the version of herself that had been excited about us. She didn't, and I didn't chase that version of her either. That was my second mistake. The weeks leading up to that Tuesday were tense in the specific way that happens when two people are living in the same space, but have stopped really occupying the same world. We still cooked together sometimes. We still watched shows at night. We still said good morning and talked about our days. But there was a glass wall between us. I could see her. She could see me. We just couldn't reach each other anymore. I tried, once, to have the real conversation. It was a Sunday, about 3 weeks before she ended things. I sat down at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee, and I said, I think we need to actually talk about what's going on between us. She looked at me. Then she looked at her coffee. And then she said, I'm not in the headspace for a heavy conversation right now. She took her mug to the bedroom. I sat there alone with 2 cups of coffee, and I thought about getting up, about following her, about pushing through that door and saying, no, we're doing this now, because if we don't do this now, I don't think there's a later. But I didn't. I sat there. I drank my coffee, and I let the moment die. The night she said what she said, I'd actually been in a decent mood. I'd just wrapped a big project for a client I genuinely liked, a branding package for a small independent bookshop. It was the kind of work I got into design for. I'd been looking forward to sharing it with her, actually. I'd printed out a few of the final pieces and had them laid on the counter to show her. She walked past them without looking, went straight to the fridge, opened it, stared into it, closed it, and then turned around and said it. I think I deserve better than this. I wonder sometimes what she saw when she looked at me in that moment. Whether she saw someone worth fighting for. Whether she saw the person she'd fallen in love with, buried under 2 years of mutual silence. Or whether she saw exactly what she'd decided to see before she even said the words. I think it was the last one. That first night alone, I cleaned the apartment. Not out of grief. Not to keep myself busy in that cliched, heartbreak movie way. I just looked around and realized how much of the space had quietly stopped being mine. There were throw pillows in colors I'd never chosen. A piece of wall art I'd always found too loud for the room. A scented candle that made the whole place smell like something I didn't particularly like. I didn't throw any of it out that night. I just noticed it, and I went to sleep. I slept better than I had in months. That told me something. The next morning, I called my old friend Owen. Owen and I had been friends since college. He was one of those people who knew you well enough to say things straight without it feeling like criticism. I told him what happened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How are you doing with it?" I said, honestly, "I'm not sure I know yet." He said, "That's an honest answer." He asked if I wanted to come over. I said no. I said I needed a day or 2 alone first. He understood. He always did. I spent that first week doing something I hadn't done in a long time. Nothing. Not nothing like laziness. Nothing like space. I woke up when I woke up. I made coffee. I sat by the window and watched the street below for stretches of time that I didn't measure. I cooked things I wanted to eat instead of meals I'd built around her preferences. I played music she would have turned down. I left books open on the couch. I let the apartment breathe. And somewhere in that first week, I started noticing something. The relief I'd felt on that Tuesday night wasn't fading. It was deepening, like my lungs were slowly remembering how to fully expand. I'm not going to pretend I didn't think about her. I did. Not with longing. Or not entirely. Mostly I thought about the version of us that had existed in the beginning. Early mornings on that terrible couch she'd had in her old apartment. A road trip we'd taken to the coast, where we'd gotten lost for 40 minutes and laughed the whole time instead of getting frustrated. The way she used to reach for my hand without thinking, just absently, like it was something her fingers did on their own. I grieved that version. That was worth grieving. But I noticed that I couldn't separate that version from everything that had come after it. And everything that had come after it had been slow and heavy and full of the specific exhaustion of someone trying to be enough for a person who had already quietly decided they weren't. By the end of the first week, I'd made a few decisions. The first was that I was going to take on more work. Not because I needed to fill time or numb pain, but because I'd quietly shelved several projects over the past year that I'd actually wanted to pursue. A personal portfolio site. A series of editorial illustrations I'd been building concepts for. A friend's album artwork project that I'd kept putting off. I told myself I was busy, but looking back, I wasn't busy. I was just avoiding the energy it took to create when I was spending so much of myself managing a relationship that was quietly caving in. The second decision was about the apartment. I rearranged it. Not drastically, but I moved things. Took down the wall art I'd never liked. Found a piece I'd done myself 3 years ago, a print I actually loved, and put it in its place. Moved the furniture in the living room so it felt more like mine. Donated the throw pillows. Replaced the candle with one that smelled like cedarwood. The apartment started feeling like a place I actually wanted to be in. That was new. The second week was when I started running. I want to be clear. I did not start running because I was trying to transform myself for any dramatic reason. I started running because Owen called me and said, "I need a running partner. My usual one has a knee thing. Come with me Saturday." And I said yes because I didn't have a reason to say no. That Saturday run was hard. I was not a runner. I am not built with any natural affinity for running. My lungs made opinions very clear in the first 6 minutes. But Owen ran at a pace I could match. We talked most of the time. About nothing and about everything. About the breakup, a little. About a business idea he'd been sitting on. About a film we'd both seen recently. About the city looking different in the early morning when most people were still asleep. By the time we finished, I was wrecked. But I felt something I couldn't quite name. Lighter, maybe. Like some chemical in my brain had been replenished. I said I'd come back next Saturday. I came back on Wednesday too. And Friday. The third week was when things started to shift in ways I hadn't expected. A client I'd done a small project for 2 years ago reached out. His name was Aaron, and he ran a boutique creative studio. He said he'd been thinking about expanding his freelance team, and it kept coming back to the work I'd done for him. We had coffee. He explained the kind of projects he had coming in, brand identity work, mostly for mid-sized companies. He wanted someone he could bring in on a project-by-project basis. The arrangement was flexible. The pay was better than my usual rates. The work was exactly the kind I liked. I said yes. That same week, I finished the editorial illustration series I'd been putting off. All 7 pieces. I'd had the concept sitting in a folder for 8 months. I sat down on a Monday morning, and I didn't get up until I'd worked through 3 of them. Then 2 more the next day. Then the final 2 in one sitting on Thursday. When I stepped back and looked at all 7 laid out on my screen, something moved in my chest. Not emotion. Not exactly. More like recognition. Like, there you are. My friend Nate texted me out of nowhere that Thursday night. We'd known each other since our mid-20s, lost touch a bit when Claire and I started getting serious, in the way that happens without anyone meaning for it to. He'd heard through Owen that Claire and I had split up. He said, "Hey, I know you're probably fine, but just in case you're not, I'm around." I'd always liked that about Nate. He never assumed he knew how you were feeling. He just opened a door. I texted back, surprisingly okay. Bordering on good, honestly. That feel weird to say? He replied, "No. Sometimes it's the right ending." I saved that message. Not because it was particularly profound, just because it was true, and true things feel worth keeping sometimes. I should talk about what I was actually feeling by this point, because I think people expect grief to move in a straight line, and it doesn't. There were mornings I woke up and reached for my phone expecting a message from her. There were nights I set 2 plates out of muscle memory and then stood there looking at the second one. There was one particular Sunday, about 2 weeks in, where I found one of her earrings behind the bathroom shelf, one she'd been looking for months, and I held it in my palm for a long moment and felt the loss of the whole thing settle on me in a way it hadn't before. That was real. That hurt in a real way, but it was also clean. That's the only word I have for it. It hurt the way a wound hurts when it's healing. Not the drawn-out ache of something still infected. Just honest pain with a direction. Around the 3-week mark, a mutual friend of ours, a woman named Tess, who'd been friends with both of us separately before she'd known us as a couple, reached out and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I said yes. We met at a place near her office. She was careful at first, testing the temperature of things, but I told her I was fine and meant it, and after a while she relaxed into the conversation. At some point she said, I don't know. She seems unsettled. I didn't ask her to elaborate. I said, that's between her and herself. Tess looked at me for a moment. You seem different, she said. Different how? She thought about it. Less compressed, she said. I like that. I didn't know what to do with it exactly, but I liked it. For weeks after the breakup, I did something I'd been meaning to do for 2 years. I called my sister. Her name was Cora. We were close when we were younger, but the years had put distance between us in the quiet way they do, not through any fight or fracture, just through the slow drift of separate lives. She answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call, she said. How'd you know I would? Because you always go quiet when things are hard, and you always come back when you're ready to be loud again. I laughed. The first real laugh I'd had in a while. We talked for nearly 2 hours. She talked about her kids, about her husband, about a renovation project they'd been slowly torturing themselves with. I talked about the breakup, about the relief, about the illustration series, about running on Thursday mornings, about how the apartment finally felt like mine. She said, it sounds like you got yourself back. I didn't answer right away. I looked around the apartment from where I was sitting, the cedarwood candle, the rearranged furniture, the print on the wall that I'd made with my own hands. And I said, yeah, I think I did. The month passed differently than I expected. Months usually feel like something being endured when they follow loss. This one felt like something being reclaimed. I kept running. I finished 3 projects for Aaron's studio. I launched the editorial series on my portfolio site, and within a week it had gotten more attention than anything I'd put out in 2 years. An art director from a magazine I'd admired for a long time messaged me about potential collaboration. I booked a weekend trip to see Cora and her family, the first time I'd visited them in 14 months. I had dinner with Owen twice, with Nate once, with Tess, unexpectedly again. I went to a film screening alone one Friday night and didn't feel self-conscious about it for even a second. I slept well. I cooked meals I wanted to cook. I read 3 books I'd had on my shelf for over a year. I wasn't performing happiness. I wasn't documenting a glow-up for anyone to see. I was just living, quietly, fully, for the first time in a long time in a way that felt entirely mine. And then she called. It was a Sunday morning. I'd just gotten back from a run. I was standing in the kitchen, still slightly out of breath, drinking a glass of water when my phone buzzed on the counter. Her name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a moment, not hesitating, just noticing. Noticing that I didn't feel the lurch in my chest I might have expected. No sudden rush of hope. No dread either. Just a kind of steady calm. I answered. Hey, she said. Hey, I said. A pause. How are you doing? Good, I said. And then, because it was true and felt worth being clear about. Really good, actually. Another pause. Longer. Can we talk? She said. In person, I mean. I've been thinking about some things, and I just think it would be better face to face. I thought about it. Not dramatically. Not making her wait. I just genuinely sat with the question. Sure, I said. When were you thinking? This week? Whenever works for you. I looked at my week in my head. Thursday afternoon, I said. I can do coffee. Yeah, she said. Coffee. Okay. The place on Elm. Works for me. Okay. A breath. Okay. I'll see you Thursday. See you Thursday, I said. I hung up. I finished my water. Made breakfast. Started my Sunday. I want to be honest about what I thought she was going to say. I didn't think she was calling because she had something new to report about her life. I didn't think it was a practical matter, splitting some shared possession we'd forgotten, some logistical loose end. I thought she was coming back. Not because I was arrogant. Not because I couldn't imagine someone walking away from a relationship without looking back, but because of the way she'd sounded on the phone. That specific quality in someone's voice when they've been somewhere and found it wasn't what they expected and are trying to find their way back to something solid. I'd heard it before. Not from her, but I knew what it sounded like. I didn't change anything about my Thursday because of the meeting. I worked in the morning, had lunch, went to the gym before heading to meet her. I wore what I would have worn. I didn't rehearse. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't arrive 5 minutes early to position myself strategically, and I didn't arrive 10 minutes late to make a point. I got there when I got there. She was already seated when I walked in. I noticed her before she saw me. She looked tired, actually, not in a physical way. Something behind her eyes. The kind of tired that comes from spending weeks inside a decision you're not sure you actually wanted to make. She looked up. She saw me. And something moved across her face that I couldn't quite read. Not quite shock. Not quite regret. Something quieter than both of those. I sat down across from her. Ordered a coffee. Let the first few seconds of silence settle naturally. You look well, she said. I am well, I said. No deflection in it. No performance. Just the plain fact of it. She nodded slowly. Looked at the table. Then looked back up. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she started. Okay, I said. About us. About how things ended. About the things I said. I waited. I didn't rush her. I didn't fill the silence to ease her discomfort. I just let her say what she'd come to say. I think I was in a really difficult place, she said. With work and with, I don't know, something in me that needed things to feel different. And I think I took that out on us. On you. I held her gaze. I think I made it about you not being enough, she said. When really, I wasn't sure what I wanted. And it was easier to frame it as a problem with you than to sit with the uncertainty. I appreciated that she'd gotten there. I genuinely did. It wasn't easy to say, and she was saying it clearly. I hear you, I said. I've missed you, she said. There it was. She looked at me carefully when she said it, watching for the part where I said it back. I looked at her for a moment, and I said, I understand that. She blinked. Okay. But, I mean, do you miss me too? I've missed what we had in the beginning, I said honestly. The good parts. Yeah, but I think that version of us has been gone for a long time. Before you even said what you said that Tuesday. She was quiet. I think I've had a month to sit with that, I said. And I think I've reached somewhere I didn't expect to reach. Which is, I thought about the word Tess had used. And I thought about the conversation with Cora. And about Thursday morning runs. And cedarwood. And the print on the wall. Okay, I said simply. Okay, she repeated. With how things are, I said. With where I am. I'm okay with it. She stared at me. Not angrily. Something more complicated than anger. You're not angry? She said. Why would I be angry? Because you were honest, I said. Maybe not in the most considerate way, but you were honest. You didn't drag it out for years. You said what you felt. She shook her head slightly. I expected you to fight more, she said. I know, I said. That night, she said. You just nodded. And I thought you'd call by the next day. I thought you'd come around. I looked at her carefully. Why did you expect that? She didn't answer immediately. Because I thought you needed me more than I needed you, she said. The words were quiet. She knew how they sounded the moment they left her mouth. Her expression shifted slightly. That sounds terrible, she said. It sounds honest, I said. And then, carefully, but I think you were wrong about that. The rest of the conversation was slower. We talked for almost 90 minutes. She told me about the weeks since the breakup. About going out with friends and finding it didn't fill the thing she'd thought it would. About Felix. Actually, she mentioned him with a slight look that told its own story, something that had gone nowhere or gone sideways. She didn't explain, and I didn't ask. About her apartment. She'd moved into a place with a roommate, a decision that had seemed freeing and had turned out to feel lonelier than she expected. She talked about looking at the life she'd imagined and finding the image less clear now that the obstacles to it had been removed. I listened to all of it. I didn't gloat. I didn't perform sympathy I didn't feel. I just listened. Because underneath all of it, she was a person who'd made a choice and was living with the shape of it. That was human. That deserved to be heard. But somewhere in the listening, I kept waiting for something. Some pull. Some part of me that would start leaning back toward her the way you lean toward warmth. It didn't come. Near the end, she asked, do you think there's any chance for us? I looked at her across the table. At the face I'd woken up next to for months. At the person I'd once been so sure about. I said, I don't. The directness of it made her go still. Not because of the things you said, I added. Not out of anger. Just, I think we were already at the end before you named it. In the months since, I think I've become someone who needs different things. Who wants different things? What different things? She asked. And I thought about how to answer that. And then I said something that surprised even me. A life that feels like mine, I said. She looked at me. I think she understood. Or started to. I was trying to turn you into something you didn't want to be, she said quietly. I let you try, I said. That's on me too. We sat with that for a moment. Two people being honest with each other, possibly for the first time in a long time. It wasn't cathartic the way movies promise these conversations will be. It didn't feel like closure in the way that word gets used, like a chapter snapping shut. It felt more like two people reaching a mutual understanding. Quietly, without drama. When we stood outside the coffee shop, she said, "I genuinely hope you're happy." I looked at her, and I said, "I genuinely am." She nodded. She looked at me for a moment like she was looking for the lie. She didn't find one, because there wasn't one. She smiled, just slightly. A real one, I think. Not performed. She said, "That's a strange thing to hear." "Is it?" "From you," she said. "Yeah. You always seemed like someone who was one thing away from happy." I thought about that. "Maybe," I said. "But the thing I was away from, it wasn't what I thought it was." She laughed softly, a small, sad sound, and then she walked away. And I stood there on the sidewalk and watched her go. And the feeling in my chest was, okay. Not triumphant. Not wounded. Not hollow. Just okay. Solid. Real. That evening, I got home, made dinner, and called Cora. I told her how it had gone. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what strikes me?" "What?" "She came back expecting to find someone who'd been waiting," she said. "And instead she found someone who'd been living." I didn't say anything for a moment. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think that's exactly it." I want to be clear about something. This isn't a story about winning. It isn't a story about proving someone wrong or coming out ahead. I didn't sit in the apartment those first weeks plotting a transformation. I didn't go running and start new projects and call old friends because I was trying to become someone worth coming back to. I did those things because they were mine. Because the life I'd been living had slowly and quietly stopped being mine, and I hadn't noticed how far I drifted until the space opened up to show me. And when she came back, and she did come back, with softer words and real vulnerability, what she found wasn't a better version of me designed to impress her. What she found was a person who no longer needed her to tell him he was enough. A person who'd remembered what it felt like to just be himself, fully, without apology. And that, I think, is what she couldn't handle. Not because she was a bad person, but because it meant the story she'd told herself wasn't the right one. She hadn't left someone who needed her. She'd left someone who simply hadn't known yet that he didn't. It's been 8 months since that coffee. I haven't spoken to Claire since. Not out of coldness. Just because there's been nothing that needed saying. I'm still freelancing. Still working with Aaron's studio, which has turned into more consistent collaboration than either of us expected. The editorial series got picked up by the magazine. 3 pieces ran in the print edition. I bought a new couch. Something I actually chose. I'm still running on Thursday mornings. I'm not fast. That still doesn't matter. Owen runs with me sometimes. Sometimes Nate joins. Once, Cora came to visit and ran alongside me for the first 2 miles before she declared herself retired from the sport and waited at a cafe instead. I went to the coast by myself last month. The same stretch of road where Claire and I had gotten lost all those years ago. I drove it alone. I didn't feel sad about it. I felt present. There's a difference. I'm not going to tell you I never miss what that relationship was in its best form. I do sometimes. You grieve the good parts even when the decision was right. That's just how it works. But I learned something that year that I keep turning over in my hands. The version of me that existed in that relationship, that quiet, compressed version, wasn't the real one. He was just the one that had learned to take up less space. And the moment the relationship ended, the moment that pressure lifted, he just expanded back. Not dramatically, not in some overnight transformation, just gradually, like a plant that had been kept in the wrong light. It didn't need anything new, just the right conditions. She'd said, "I think I deserve better than this." And she wasn't wrong. She did deserve better. She deserved someone who wanted the same life she was building. Someone whose ambitions matched hers. Someone who found the same things exciting. That wasn't me. It hadn't been for a long time. But what she'd also said, without meaning to, without probably even realizing it, is that she thought better was out there and I was the obstacle to it. And I wonder, sometimes, what she learned when she went looking. Not with satisfaction. Not with any cruelty. Just, I wonder, whether she found it. Whether she found what she was looking for. Whether the image of the life she'd wanted turned out to be a life she actually wanted to live. I hope she did. I mean that honestly. I hope she found someone whose pace matched hers. Someone who wanted the networking events and the career milestones and the particular shape of a life she had in her head. People deserve to be with someone who wants the same things. Including her. She just happened to be wrong about what that meant for me. The last thing I want to say is this. There's a specific kind of loss that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come at you. It doesn't break anything suddenly. It just seeps. It seeps in through years of small moments. The sighs, the glances, the conversations that don't happen, the version of yourself you quietly start setting aside because it seems simpler. I didn't know how much of myself I'd misplaced until I had the space to go looking. And what I found, when I looked, was that none of it was actually lost. It was all still there. The curiosity, the work I cared about, the friendships, the peace of a Thursday morning, the feeling of cooking something you actually want to eat in a space that actually feels like yours. All of it, still there, waiting. And that, more than anything else in this story, is what she couldn't handle when she came back. Not that I'd become something new, but that I'd become, again, something real. Something that hadn't needed her to complete it. Something that had simply been waiting, quietly, for the right conditions to be itself. She'd expected to walk back into the aftermath. Instead, she walked into the beginning of something. And it just happened to be mine. If you've made it this far, if something in this felt familiar, if you've ever found yourself smaller inside something that used to feel like home, I hope you know what I learned. The relief you feel when something ends isn't betrayal of what it was. Sometimes it's just the sound of breathing, finally, all the way in.